Okay, so I am going to be painting, doing a little watercolor demonstration. I just wanted you to see different ways of watercoloring, because if your next project has to do with watercolor, you may or may not remember how to work with watercolor. So what I have right now is just a simple little palette. What I always tell you guys, please do not use colors straight from the palette, because those are really generic colors. I want you as an artist to mix your own colors. Your project is going to be a landscape or seascape, or honestly just a memory that you will be watercoloring, but you can use these techniques for your painting. So we're going to be doing wet on wet, wet on dry, and a wash. The first thing I'm going to do though is wet on wet, and that is to do, say, a sky. If I want to show that it could be like a sunrise or something, we are going to actually just right now, you maybe can see I have just a little ocean scene drawn here. This actually is back from Art Foundations. I taped my piece of paper all the way around, because with watercolor it tends to absorb all of the water, and so the edges will start curling up. I also have a paper towel, a glass of water, and my brush, not a very fancy brush, just a watercolor brush. You could tell it's watercolor brush because my bristles are very soft. You don't want a very hard brush. That does not work well with watercolor. So I have water on my brush right now, and all I'm going to do is get the sky wet. I'm going to be very careful not to get my mountains wet. If I got my mountains wet, then the water will want to bleed into my mountains. So you maybe cannot see what I'm doing right now, but all I'm doing is getting my sky wet. If a bristle comes out because of the cheap brushes, I can just lift it up with other bristles usually. There it goes. Okay, so for my sky, maybe I want to leave some of the areas just clear for some clouds, but I'm gonna go ahead and start with a little sunrise. So maybe I want to start with, for this, I'm just gonna start with like a yellow right down here. And I can go side by side, and honestly, I'm just kind of tapping it on there so it looks almost like clouds are in there. Wash my brush a little bit. I'm gonna bleed to an orange. And with my orange, I let it go ahead and blend a little into my yellow. I can just go right on top of my palm tree that's going. I always start very light. If I start off too strong of a color, then it's harder to take off. Good news is if you do put too much or a blob comes out, I would honestly, I usually typically have a roll of toilet paper to just roll on top of it. I know toilet paper is a hot commodity right now, so maybe you could use paper towel or something, but I don't mind having a little bit of toilet paper or something just to roll it. I'm going to use a little red. I'm not going to use a lot of red. I'm definitely going over my orange with that. And then I'm going to end with a blue. But again, I'm kind of going to leave some areas for my clouds in there. So I'm just kind of leaving some areas white. So I'm going to let that dry. That is a wet on wet technique. The next thing we're going to do, we have to skip this section since it is right next to our sky. We're going to skip that so that it doesn't bleed. We don't want our mountains to bleed into our sky. So if I were to go ahead and paint the mountains right now, you're going to end up with a big mess. So watercolor, it definitely is for patient people. If you are a perfectionist, you may find this really hard because you want the watercolor to do one thing and it wants to do its own thing. So in the tray, I'm actually going to mix some blue. Again, we don't want just generic blue water. I want you to mix your own color, and I kind of want my color to be a bluish green, like fresh water. If I want a darker, that's kind of pretty right there. I want to get most of it off of my brush because again, I want to work with layers. Water is side to side, and this is called wet on dry technique. And the reason it's wet on dry is because I'm keeping my paper dry as I start. I am actually going to just brush in a horizontal direction. Water is horizontal, so you don't want to go vertical and every other way. If you're not painting water, then you don't have to worry about this part so much, but it should get a little lighter as you come closer to the shore. So it's going to be very dark back here. I'm not going to worry just yet about my palm tree, but a nice, and since I have watercolor still on my lid, I'm just taking it nice and easy. Gets lighter as So I could let that dry right now, and then what I would want to do is go in with another layer, maybe back here with my watercolor, and that'll darken it up. But I love these little bright whites is what we call them. It's nice to keep those little bright whites to show maybe a reflection of the sun hitting the water. We're going to let that dry. And then a flat wash of a color is when you just take one color. So I'm going to make a color of sand in my lid, yellow with a touch of brown. And I don't want to go straight on really dark with a sandy color. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to show you a flat wash of a color, and we're going to do a flat wash of color with the mountains too. And go in is just all one color. I'm just putting just a wash is like a light color. I got to be careful not to touch my water. So that is a flat wash. So you can do that with some of your areas. And of course we would let that dry, and in a little while we'll go in with some details. So while that's drying, we're going to have to, for the sake of time, pretend that our sky is dry. So I'm just going to be careful not to touch the top of my sky with this next part or my water. Otherwise it'll run in there, and maybe you'll see that it ran. If it does, I'm going to mix like a mountain color. And I think I want my mountains a wash of a purpley blue. So that's kind of nice. And I'm going to make it light, so I'm going to put more water. Get most of it off so it doesn't run everywhere. I'm doing a flat wash. I'm going to be careful not to touch my sky or my water. Okay. So there is a flat wash for my mountains. It is okay to leave bright whites. There is nothing wrong with that. You will see bright whites in watercolor all the time. Now's the fun part. Actually, while my mountains are wet, I can go in right now. Maybe I want to add a little blue where it would be a shadow. So and it's not going to be a perfect shadow. Maybe my blue is right here. That's a little dark to me. That is definitely where I would take and absorb some of that. This is perfect time to take a roll of toilet paper and roll over it, and it would just soak it right up. I'm going to put some details coming the other way. So washing my brush, I'm going to add some more of this blue violet that I originally had. And maybe I want to come in this way, just to kind of pop some things. With watercolor, I want you to have fun with it. If you can't find watercolor at your house or you didn't pick some up, you can use anything. You can use food color. You can use vegetable juice, like beets would make a nice bright magenta color. Mustard makes a beautiful yellow color. Coffee and tea make beautiful colors. So you can find anything. You can mix mud with dyes of things like food coloring, or if you have tie dye, or honestly, frosting colors. If you have any kind of frosting colors, if you have makeup that has coloring in it, you can use that. So again, for the sake of time, we are going to pretend that this is all dry. Normally, this is where I would say stop, leave it for the night to go dry, come back tomorrow or another day, and now you paint all the little details. So we are going to pretend that this is dry. And now I'm going to mix maybe color for my trunk of my tree. I don't want it just brown. Maybe I want it like a brownish black. A little hint of black in there. Get a lot of it off. And for my tree, I'm actually going to, you're going to see how this runs. I'm going to go just on the one side of it mainly. And then I'm going to come in, and I'm not going to hit all of it. I'm going to leave some bright whites in there to make it look like it's a texture. Do you see how that's bleeding? That's why you wait. But again, we're pretending like we waited, which I know that I didn't, but that's okay. So normally that would not run if you're patient. I can go in also and take what I made before. If this dried overnight, you can just add a little water to that, and I can come in. You can make little footprints, make little details, whatever you decide. If I want to make tall grasses, like little sea grasses, a little green and brown, get it nice and wet. I would twirl my brush to get a nice point. If you have a small brush, this is also where I'd switch. If you don't, you're using very light hand here. Dot, dot, dot. Let's come up with the seagrass. Same with the palm tree. So I'm going to use that same color. This is going to bleed everywhere, but I just want to show you so I can post this so you can get started whenever you're ready on your project. I like for the palm, I like grassy green. I would not use just this plain green. Add a little brown to it or something to give it a little more of a natural color. I have way too much on there, but this will at least let you see what we're trying to do. Okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. And have fun with this. Watercolor is certainly not always the most forgiving medium. It really likes to do its own thing. But I did want you to see what happens if you're not patient and you don't wait. It just bleeds. You really have to work with layers. You have to work with time. Let things dry overnight. Do not go and do wet on top of wet when you want details, because otherwise you're going to get something like that. You really want your layers to dry in between. Okay, have fun.